Welcome to the Winning with Shopify podcast. This is the podcast to help you scale your Shopify store into a money-making machine. Email has the highest ROI of all marketing channels. Are you maximizing its potential and growing your list? Drive conversions and create more connections with Seguno, the top-rated email marketing platform built exclusively for Shopify. Seguno is offering Winning with Shopify listeners an extended free trial, plus a complimentary strategy session with an email marketing expert. Visit seguno.com/winningwithshopify to claim your offer. Now, over to your host, Nick Truman.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Winning with Shopify podcast. For anyone that's not tuned in before, welcome to the show. Absolute pleasure to have you tuning in. And for anyone that's been tuning in for a while, it's such a pleasure to have you guys tuning in. Thank you for tuning in every week. Thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for making it happen. We really value your input. We value your reviews. We value your emails, and we also value your 5-star rating and subscriber button, which is a shameless plug. But thank you so much, guys. It's great having you all tuning in. Today, we are continuing our series with Seguno, talking about email and all the other things that surround email. And I know we've been doing this for a couple of months now, but we've got so many different angles we're going to try and cover before the end of October. So stay tuned for that. And final notice for me before I introduce my guest today is apologies for last Friday. We didn't post. We normally post every single Friday. We had a little bit of a diary mix up. I've also been away for a couple of days, so apologies. We're going to be posting a little bit more over the next week or so just to catch up, to make sure we get all the episodes in that we should in October. That's enough from me. Let me introduce my very special guest. His name's Alex. He runs a business called Barc London. Alex, without further ado, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's exciting to be here, and I'm happy to have this conversation today.
Great stuff. Well, I'm looking forward to diving in and finding out a bit more about you and the business. So why don't you start off by giving us a little overview to your background and also to your business, Barc London?
Sure. Okay, so I've commercially operated a business of some description for the last 12, 13 years, but made the transition from a bricks and mortar offering in hospitality to e-commerce about 4 to 5 years ago. So if I'm open, it started as a little bit of a case study, passion project for certain reasons that I wanted to leave the last industry and personal reasons that I wanted to try and get to grips with online businesses and how they operate. And that has been interesting and challenging. And I sold my previous business last year. So I've been operating an e-commerce store full time with no distractions now for a little over 12 months. So nice. I've arrived here, so to speak.
Well, welcome to the space. It's, I mean, we're having a little chat before we hit record, and I'm sure some of that's going to come to light in our conversation today as well. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good things out there. There's a lot of confusion out there, and there's a lot of bad things out there, which hence why we run this podcast, is to try and bring some good stuff to light. But obviously, you say you used to work in a bricks and mortar business. So I guess the first big topic to talk about then is what's different? And is it literally everything, or are there specific things you've noticed as you've made that transition?
It's a really weird experience, to be honest, because when I was considering moving to an online operation, at the beginning I had a business partner who was extremely well versed in the e-commerce space, who had huge clients like Jimmy Choo, Fiorucci, Bugatti, Sunseeker Yachts, and I was very wooed by the pitch and made a conscious effort to learn and go to learning lunches and learning breakfasts. And to be honest with you, it sounded like a foreign language. So again, like anyone in their mid-30s is going to remember when the internet was like AOL in a room with a dial-up that if someone picked up the phone, it would disconnect. And obviously we're miles away from those years, but I very much remember that was the internet for my upbringing. And it's very easy to get confused or to get lost or to feel as though you have no idea what you're doing because it's quite foreign and it's online. So I spent too many years feeling as though I didn't understand how internet businesses worked. But I think if you make the analogy that there are so many similarities between living online and having an online offering than having a physical bricks and mortar offering, I think you can start to demystify some of the acronyms and the black magic and try and navigate some of the sales pitches that people present to you when you do run an online operation, which can be really overwhelming. And some of my biggest commercial mistakes have just been taking some advice at face value without doing my due diligence or thinking about the process that I go through, which I can explain a little bit easier. But at the beginning, really hard transition. I had a business that was operating, was successful in its own right, and then, huge risk moving away from that, going online, especially with some of the problems that the online world presents itself, especially with someone in my position who had, at the time, little to no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we were saying before we started recording as well, which I think is really relevant to this point, is there is so much confusion out there. And I think for me, one of the things that drives confusion is something that works for your business won't work for the next business. So it's, you kind of, like you were saying about, being wooed by the pitch. There's certainly a lot of case studies. You're like, look what I've done for these massive brands. You're like, well, why would I not, not at face value and at first touch, like, well, that all makes sense. Yeah, well, let's go for that then. This person obviously knows what they're doing, or this agency, or whatever the situation is. Whereas when you get down to the nuts and bolts, it's like, but they've never launched a startup, or they've never worked with these kind of products before, and never understood this industry. And quite quickly you find that, what works for one business won't work for the next. We've had it before in my agency where we've worked for two clients like back to back. So you like work for one, you stop working with them. So you naturally try and pitch to some of their competitors with the pitch of like, we know what we're doing in this space. And then you get under the hood and you go, do you know what? The actual marketing bit's very similar and that bit's easy. But the politics, the structure of the new client is so different that actually the way we approach everything, all the processes we use, everything needs to change. So we're pretty much starting from a standing start. And it's almost more dangerous to realize that 6 months in than it is if you just went in from the get-go going, you're unique and we need to consider you're unique and work from the ground up. How are we going to make this relationship work? What we're going to do for you guys and how we're going to make it fit together. So I guess a really big question then, and a good question for a lot of our listeners that are probably starting out, or this is, the first business they've run or they're running it part-time. How did you overcome that learning curve? What were the differentiating things you did to start learning and knowing what you're looking for and how you're going to make things tick?
But by listening to inverted commas experts in the space and believing the pitch and the promise and having a lack of results. So that will always come at a cost. So when you feel as though you're inferior in terms of knowledge or experience, so therefore you outsource that, whether that's email marketing, paid media, SEO, maybe web development, I can sidestep because I'm not going to learn to code, right? But everything else you can maybe farm out for inverted commas experts that come at high cost with no guarantees. And you quickly learn that being open, people are much happier and more frivolous with your money than they are their own, as you would be with your own. So if you were in complete granular control of how you spend your money, I think that is the only way in a high competitive online world that you can start to really get to grips with things. And I think, like, especially when you talk from like 0 to 1 million, every little penny, every little pound, every little sale really matters. And you got to view it from like your standpoint. If you're a part-time online operator or you're considering going online, you're going to know your idea, you're going to know your business, you're going to know your offering better than anyone else. So to assume that somebody else can come in and talk your language better than you, I think is a silly mistake to make, and one I have made repeatedly.
Yeah. So I guess if I summarize that, it's almost learning by being burnt, which is not a good thing, as you say, very costly.
Yeah, and then hindsight's a wonderful thing. When I cast my eye back to look at like the capital that we had available at certain points in this business, and to arrive now where we are in complete control and it's a very small in-house team and we're doing much better than the past, I can't help but reflect, if only we didn't make that decision, or if only we didn't spend over here. And I think I'm talking to other people in my position, it's really common. And then anyone who, is verging on desperate for more sales or really wants it to move and is looking outside of themselves thinking, well, they're doing this and they're doing that. And you can easily start to lose yourself by copying other people, or kind of fall savvy to lots of people saying we can triple your turnover or we can quintuple your turnover and don't pay us a penny. And you can just, out of desperation, believe that this person is going to click the button that you didn't click and suddenly your business is going to fly overnight. And that's really not necessarily the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The reason I chuckled then is as an agency, so sitting on the other side of this, I can totally sympathize with where you are. I can totally understand that. And I think we win more pitches now by lowering expectations and explaining there's no silver bullet. And I mean, one thing we do, and don't get me wrong, we've not got all the answers. It doesn't work every time with every client. And we totally understand that. And I totally accept that. Something we've started doing, though, that I think has been really key is what we call a resource evaluation. And we evaluate the resource at the client. So we talk to people like yourself and say, what can you do internally? Like, if we're going to do SEO, we need to do technical stuff. Who's making those changes? And most importantly, who's approving them? Because what we don't want is your web agency who's outsourced. You say about, need a coder to do your coding. We don't want them just doing as we say. You need to make business decisions about the recommendations we're giving you. Saying like, we want to change this, and you need to go, that won't work for our customer for these reasons. And we need to, in a good relationship, say, cool, we completely accept that. We still want to achieve this. So what's the other solution? What's the lateral thinking? What else could we do to please Google, improve things for customers and do this without the high cost or whatever the pushback is? The second thing we need to do is content. Are you going to write it? Are we going to write it? If we write it, how are we going to get your tone of voice in place? But also, I think the thing for newer businesses, certainly with content, is, as you say about right at the start, you don't know who your customers are because you haven't got any. So actually understanding what makes them tick. I do think, and this is something I don't know if he ever listens to my podcast, but my uncle used to be our FD, and he always used to say to me, you only get out a supplier what you put in. So if we're the supplier, get more from the client. If we have a supplier, spend time with them, ask them how we can be a better client, how can we change things? And one of the biggest things I think with that is exactly what you're doing at the moment. And I think where businesses do that first million, that first 5 million, doing it internally means actually when you do eventually outsource anything, like obviously you work with Seguno, hence why you're here today. So you're outsourcing some of the tech and automation side of things, but you're in control. You've outsourced absolutely. Something you're already doing yourself and doing well. And that's the differentiator. And I think if you're always going to bring an expert in, you are reliant on their passion. And as you say, how frivolous they're going to be spending your money, which is they're going to be way more liberal with it and go, we're just going to try that and see what happens. If it doesn't work, it's your money we've lost, not ours. We still get paid.
And I still pay you for it. Listen, the worst thing I've been is I've been in a contract losing money. And knowing that obviously it's not going to turn around overnight, and falling out with the owner saying like, I'm stuck, paying you a fee, knowing that you're going to spend my money next month in not an efficient way, where I'm going to run at a loss, and then have the products leave that I'm going to need to replenish. So I'm better off not spending a penny and just paying you your fee. And that's a really painful position for like small operators to be in. But that is something that I know other people have been in that position. So I guess, and look, there are some really good agencies out there, but as you know, being in the space for 15 years, there is an awful lot of people masking as very good agencies. And I think that you just need to be aware that I don't think necessarily other people or a slightly different strategy is going to be a silver bullet, a magic bullet. It's doing all the minutiae and all the detail very well, and doing all of those little things hopefully compounds over time. So it took me a while to arrive there, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we review our clients and review what's not working and what is working. And one of the things that always works is where the client takes control over. That's what I call like the kind of center of it. So they still might have agencies doing stuff. They might also do half of it themselves. They might do all of it themselves. But if they're in control in the middle, then the good client is always phoning us up saying, we're going to run an A/B test. We think we can improve the cart, because people are adding to cart, but they're not purchasing. And that's good. And like, we can tell them that, but there's only so much we can do as an outside agency. You need to make decisions and you need to see that forward. Otherwise, I mean, to quote a client of ours who, being completely transparent to everybody listening on the podcast, which might include this client, they used to say to us on a regular basis, like, right now we're breaking even, which means Spec's getting rich, which is my agency, and Google's getting rich. We're not. We're breaking even. So we're gaining customers. To which we then say, well, we need to start changing the conversation and the focus here to actually, you're getting the first sale from everybody. How do we get the second sale? That's now happening, which means earlier this year, for the first time in their first 2 years of trade, they said, we registered a profit. And then they did the same the next 2, 3, 4 months. We're heading into Black Friday at the moment. So, but when we started, we were very clear, like, your first year is going to be a write-off and we need to minimize the loss, but it's going to take time. And when they brought us
customer acquisition piece, isn't it? It's expensive.
So expensive.
Right? And then at the beginning, you don't necessarily have the data to know what your lifetime value of that consumer is. So like, it's a really sensitive piece of the puzzle. Like, I'd be happy spending £25 to acquire this customer if I could guarantee they're going to spend 300. But
Yep.
if they're only spending 25, then I've got to pay the VAT.
Google and the agency get
bills.
rich.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I think we need to be really careful with that. And I mean, bringing it around to lifetime value, you know, and talking about email, what do you guys do then? Because as you say, it's, you know, it's so expensive to acquire a customer. What do you guys do to get more from the customer, to get those repeat orders, to build that story, that relationship? How do you guys go about it? You know, what's the first thing that happens either when they make their first purchase or even before? You know, what does the strategy look like?
I think for context, you should know that for many years, email was an afterthought. So I was massively blindsided by the vanity of revenue and not necessarily profit, and, you know, trying to get market share and trying to get X amount of new acquisitions and not really looking at the detail. So and then reminding myself, oh crap, I've not sent an email. So it was kind of, not only was it an afterthought, it was rushed, it wasn't planned, it wasn't strategized, and it was just sending an email for email's sake. Now, because we're online and everything within reason, a bit harder nowadays, but it's trackable, right? Especially email. You usually find that when you send an email, just that prompt, just that, oh, hello, we exist, can trigger a few sales, even if the email has any sales intent, you know, there's no real call to action. So that became apparent. And then it is about that, okay, you know, CRM, customer relation management. So how are we nurturing people in our ecosystem? And then when I used to think about hospitality offerings, if a customer walked into either our late night offering or our cocktail bar for the first time, you usually talk to that person in a completely different tone of voice than if you were going to talk to somebody who is a regular. Because usually in that world, you would know the regular's name, you would know their order, you would know a little bit about them. And so it's really transitioning that kind of thought process to who are our customers and what is their relationship with us and how would we change what we do based on that. What upsell opportunities do we have for this customer? And to know that, we would have to start to segment out who our customers are. So it's really kind of, email really tags into you looking at trying to maximize the earning potential for everybody that you've introduced yourself to. So there'll be a different tactic to people who have shown an interest in your offering but not purchased, a different tactic to people who have purchased and maybe not repurchased for a while, maybe a different tactic to people who really do like what you do and purchase quite often. And seeing as, you know, that whole customer acquisition piece and that demand generating and brand or offering awareness can be expensive, especially if you choose one platform and there's a paid element to it. So you're going to use paid media as the driver. Unless you're like VC backed or you've got really healthy budgets, and I bootstrapped everything, so I was not in that position, it can be really expensive. And so why would you not, if you are choosing to do quite an expensive route for customer acquisition, make sure that you've at least covered all bases in the store to maximize that particular person's earning potential? Or if you've just got their attention, try and approach them through quite a cost-effective manner to convert them. So email for me has been a huge afterthought. And also, like, at one point I employed an agency to do my emails, and that was an interesting lesson because, you know, yes, they tracked sales, but the approach was not really how I would do it. It was verging on spammy. It was very sales driven. It was annoying me, and I'm the store owner. So God only knows how many people that would inadvertently annoy on the receiving end of these too many emails. So it's a fine line to walk. But I think the conversation any store owner needs to have with themselves is just about their offering and who their customers are. And even if you're brand new, you know, and you're designing an offering for yourself or for your best friend or for a customer in mind, you know, keep having that conversation, because you should have a better idea of who you're targeting than anybody else that you can plug in as a third party, either a freelancer or an agency. So yeah, it's not as difficult as people make out, I think, and quite easily overlooked.
Not. Yeah, it's interesting talking to you because you've almost done the step that I want all clients I've ever worked with to have already done, which is we can keep people buying stuff, we can keep them engaged, we've got that, we just need more in the top now, and we can get more in the top. And that's, as you say, it comes down to like, you know, the shiny object, which is revenue and acquiring new customers. I think something I want to pick up on that you mentioned as well is about the regular versus new. There's a couple of things I'm going to come back to as well in a sec.
Sure.
But in terms of the regular visitors, not necessarily just customers purchasing, but people that are visiting your site or reading your content, you're sending out an email versus the new ones. Is it just on email where you tailor that journey, that conversation, or do you also do something on site when they land? Is that experience different if you're not new, basically?
There is no user experience different on site from a new customer to an existing customer. We do look at the customer journey on site and make sure that, you know, the correct recommended products are there, you know, having the buy now button sticky, so it's constantly there and we're nudging you towards a purchase. There is not a big enough conscious effort to try and capture your email or your data. If I'm honest, that's an area that I would like to improve on and look at, understanding how powerful email lists can be. And again, like, I think you got to hammer home that people trade in email lists. You know, that list and that data is so valuable. There are businesses out there that just sells the data. So if you've got an offering or a business,
GDPR and all the other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, look, everything's getting more complicated, and the privacy laws are. I think it's interesting that people really respond well to hyper personalized marketing, yet we don't want to share our data. You know, that's a little bit of hypocrisy there. Like, I don't want you to know anything about me, but I definitely want you to talk as if you do know.
I'm on exactly the same boat as that, I'm afraid.
You know, like, hang on, how do I do that then? You know, but email gives you the ability to do that over, like, and again, like paid media is really interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the time it's a bit of creative, either a video or a picture and a couple of lines of copy. And I can't imagine you walking into O2 and expecting the salesman to sell you an iPhone with one image and 4 sentences. And that's all he's going to say. Just, here's an image, here's 4 sentences, buy it. And it's just like, that's a really weak sales pitch. So sometimes people need a little bit longer in the consideration stage. People considering purchase might need a nudge or a little incentive. So really, we're all consumers, you know. We live in a capitalist world. We all have brands that we like and services that we like. So to put yourself in the consumer's position, I think is a really interesting exercise to do for new and existing store owners. And I really don't think it's that hard. And I think tools and tech like Shopify really demystify how hard online can be and make it really accessible to people. And then the platform that I choose to use for email, Seguno, it is so simple to use. It's refreshing to know that, like, me not being 13, 15 years in the industry like you are, have the ability to execute this to a really high standard and see results due to the effort of just drilling into the minutiae and detail.
Absolutely.
Not that hard.
The only thing I want to add on that is just about, as you say, using the site as if you were a customer, as if you're a user, and just seeing what happens, and subscribe to email and see what happens. We subscribe to all of our clients' emails, and we don't do email ourselves, but it's so important because we do the acquisition. You've got to get more from them, and if they don't buy on that first visit, you've still not acquired them. So, as you say, one of your big focuses is how do we acquire more email addresses on site when people visit? Absolutely do that. I think it's an excellent exercise. One thing we've started doing for some clients actually is doing a video rather than writing this big, long CRO audit. Because I think communication as well, even between you and the rest of your team, is so important. What you don't want is communications too short, where someone's like, okay, we need to improve the conversion rate of the site. And it's like, yep. Any more? That's too short. And too long is this enormous essay of like, I've checked every pixel on the site. And it's like, well, what do we change? I still don't know, but I've checked every pixel and it's doing this. So what we do with some clients now is we send them a short series of videos where someone who doesn't work on that client in our team, who is still an expert in digital, will sit there and go through the site and go, right, that's a bit frustrating. I don't know if I've added to cart yet. Or, okay, I'm looking at this product, thinking outside the box. I hate that phrase, but if I was a potential customer of this product, what do I need to know to buy this product? And okay, I need to know this, this, and this. Right, back to the web page. How do I find it? Okay, it doesn't tell me how big it is. It doesn't tell me how much. It's a heater. It's going to use lots of electricity, but it doesn't tell me how much. Or it says it's going to use X kilowatts an hour. Doesn't mean anything. So if it says, based on the current energy rate in the country, this heater on maximum is going to cost you 8p an hour or 8 cents. Right? Yeah, that works for me. 8p to warm the whole room. Sign me up.
Cost of a coffee a month.
That is the classic: a coffee and half a pot of shower gel, kind of thing. So those videos I think are really powerful, because then the web team can review that. Well, client first, then whoever's the web team is going to deploy some of these changes can actually review that and go, here's what's going on. So my advice to anyone who's actually looking at getting some more customer feedback on how the site operates, do it over some sort of video mechanism. So there are companies you can pay for research. There are focus groups. You could even say to some of your customers, could you go on QuickTime or whatever, hit screen record and just say everything you're thinking and use our site and buy a free product, and here's a code to get a free product. We'd love your feedback, so we want to improve it. And so for the cost of a free product, which is what, 50, 100 pounds tops, just one free product, and a nice product, so they want to do it. Or say you can choose a product under 100 pounds and here's a code to buy it. For the cost of 100 pounds, you've just had like a 50 grand CRO audit completed on the site, and from the horse's mouth what to improve. So that's one thing I'd recommend that we're doing more and more at the moment as an agency, and also recommending our clients do as well. Especially if that customer was a VIP that bought every single month, VIP customer, and then they stopped 4 or 5 months ago. Offer them that, and then they'll buy that, and B, they might come back and keep buying stuff. Especially if you then see that customer's purchase and chuck some Haribo or some sweets or something in the order, it all sweetens the deal in more ways than one. I think that's a good thing to do.
What you're essentially saying as well is like how valuable that customer is. So their experience, their journey, how they interact with you. And I think that reflecting on how many things we've changed internally or with our products or iterations of have all come back from customer feedback, to be honest. And again, like that whole area of business, CRM, customers, the relationship you have with those is hyper important. And again, when you go on that journey of just growth for growth's sake and chasing revenue, you're in danger of just chasing sales and viewing them as just one sale, rather than understanding that that's a human being behind the sale that has chose to spend money with you, with your offering, potentially with your passion. So, treat them as an individual. And I honestly think that there's a lot of our online offerings that are quite impersonal. And then you feel like that. You feel as though it's just, you just wanted the sale. So I revert back to, again, you couldn't be like that in a hospitality offering. You couldn't be like that in a coffee shop. You couldn't be like that in a bar,
Yeah. I've used the analogy as well of if you look at your landing page data on Google Analytics, and there's a right way and a not as good way. I won't say wrong way because it's all relative, but there's a right way and a not as good way, in my opinion, to read that data. Is certainly on Shopify. If you're running things like Google Shopping ads, don't look at like how many people land on each product. Look at how many people in total land on all products, because those will be all your Google Shopping links. And then look at that page and go, like you say about I love the analogy of the bar. And it's like, the person coming in going, oh, morning, or maybe in a bar, evening. Do you want the usual?
Sometimes,
and you make
sometimes morning.
Weatherspoons in the UK that tends to be drinking from about 8 o'clock in the morning, which stag do's only these days for me. But I think on the on that note, it's like someone's landing on a product page. So it's like, again, what are the barriers? I don't know who you are because you're a small business, so I've probably never heard of you. And those are the people we're targeting. So I've never heard of you. So what does your site say immediately? Does it say free delivery? We've got some Trustpilot reviews and blah, blah, blah. Or does it say welcome to us? I mean, maybe not literally these words, but welcome to our store. We're a family-run business. The first product image, what could you put in that image to welcome someone in and tell them something about your brand? Or even the second image, if that's visible in the kind of carousel at the bottom. The second image could literally be somebody like, we spoke to Keep Candles. They don't do it anymore, but they used to on their site. I don't know why they've stopped, but they used to have a picture of somebody actually manufacturing the candle and making it. And it wasn't with blue gloves on in a big, Chinese warehouse factory somewhere. It was somebody actually in the woods. And it was like, this is honey that's come from the bee, and we make the candle quickly, and how we add the scent in. We do it outdoors. So it's as fresh as possible when it goes into the candle, because that makes a stronger scent, blah, 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 blah. So the first minute I've landed on their page, I'm getting all of this. And then when I scroll down below the normal standard product info, it like welcomes you to the site. I've never had them on the show, but I'm a big customer of them. Tropic Feel, which is a shoe brand based in Spain. They're on Shopify Plus. Tropic Feel literally have a load of plastic bottles to show you how many plastic bottles, they're all like crushed and whatever, how many we've melted down to make the shoe. So you're actually helping the environment doing this. A company called Tree, who we've had on the podcast before when we're working with another sponsor. Tree are planting trees. They want to plant 1 billion trees by 2030. They've planted 100 million so far. And they're a tree planting business, not a t-shirt company. So again, there's a story. I want to buy their products. I can buy into that. And the products are awesome. So I think that whole journey, and I think email is a really important place to start bringing that to life. But I think the thing you don't know on day one, which you and I are talking about, you guys discovering, is what are the first trigger points? What's the most effective thing to tell them first to get them to buy or subscribe? And that's the thing you've mentioned about getting more subscribers. That's the thing you guys are going to be entering onto a bit of that journey now to try and discover this messaging gets people signing up. That one doesn't. So this is the one we need to go with.
It'd be interesting to see the email journey of, say, that Spanish shoe brand, because when you've come across offerings or brands with a real heart and narrative, you can only communicate so much online, because the online store is primarily to sell. But if there's a lot of narrative and a lot of momentum and a lot of activations and a lot of things that you're doing, you know, email is a really good way of communicating that, as well as socials, you know. And don't be afraid of hitting people twice with the same message. And again, email is difficult because you've got to reflect back on your own daily experience. Like, one of my email addresses gives me anxiety because I get so many emails a day. But then, you know, you check, and then when there's an email from someone or something important to you, you do click on it. So like when a brand resonates with you, or when you are looking particularly for something, you know, you've got a good chance, as long as that message isn't just spammy or just sales and it has some narrative, of having people engage with it and respond to it. So we quite often leave open questions, and we don't use a no reply. We want to actually encourage the conversations. And then there's a huge marketing piece around actually encouraging conversations, either through DMs or through WhatsApp, and you can actually run paid media just to start a conversation. And I think all of that comes at a cost. And yes, email does come at a subscription cost, but it's pennies in comparison. So I can do the same thing and have the same outcome in a really cost-effective manner, you know, either converting a new customer or getting a repeat purchase. And we're all in it for the same thing, really. We all would like it to run smoothly, be profitable, and do what we enjoy. And I think the barrier for entry for doing a passion project or moving a bricks and mortar offering online is so low now that it's a real opportunity for so many people to start with things like Shopify and Seguno. It's just making sure you get the most out of those tools and not doing what I did for too many years and just ignoring it or not viewing it as really important.
Absolutely. And I guess, I mean, bringing it around to Seguno as well, for everyone who listens regularly, they'll know I don't big up our sponsors any more than organically, but we do select sponsors that we know offer a good offering. You know, we're big advocates of Seguno. I don't want to ask you how great they are. So instead, I'm going to ask you a question. What stuff have you started using? And I'm going to lean slightly, if we can, as well, towards the automation, because I know they're really hot on automating things so that you don't have to be clicking buttons and making too many decisions. You kind of decide the big picture and the automation does the next bit. So how are you using their platform? What automation stuff are you using? You know, and how much of a breath of fresh air is that versus previous platforms you've been on before?
I've been on the more expensive version that is widely talked about. And I think talking about Seguno as an offering, for me, it was a quarter of the price. So that had a factor in a business where you've really got a cost control to make sure that we're scaling profitably, not scaling at a loss. If you're not, again, VC backed, or you don't have a huge burn rate of capital available, those decisions should be really important. So Seguno's entry for me was really palatable. So I was like, okay, this is really quite attractive in terms of price. And then when you look at what Seguno offers in comparison to what is native to the platform, there is more functionality. So I get more functionality with Seguno than not having it. And the price to entry is palatable. And then when you go into Seguno, it actually maps out, like, here are the really obvious things that you should definitely have in place. Like, it says that for you. Like, make sure you do this. And like one of them, so my lapsed purchaser, now that for anyone who doesn't know. That's just someone who's purchased and then forgotten you exist. But I just didn't have that on for a while. And then I put that on, and like many people do, gave a little incentive to repeat purchase, and then orders started trickling in. And I'm like, oh, it was a click of a button. You know, but it's that simple, and it's as easy to overlook as it is to do. But if you drill into doing it, at least you know that there is something your business does to put your hand up if someone has forgot to pop into store, so to speak, for however many months you decide is long enough to reapproach somebody. And so they map out a lot of the obvious for you. And then you can have automations based on customer segments. So for transparency's sake, I use a third-party app which will apply a tag based on a rule to an order. So when I make that relative to my world, so that makes sense, we sell slightly elevated dog accessories, and our best-selling product is a collar. And quite often, you don't buy the lead. And so if I was a salesman in a store, a natural upsell would be, do you want to complete the set? And if I have an opportunity to reapproach you, or you come back into store a week later, how are you getting on with that collar? Do you like it? Has it met your needs? Would you consider buying the matching lead? I have an opportunity to identify what customers have purchased and haven't purchased based on setting up some really simple rules. And on the app I use, it's, do you mind me saying it?
Yeah, go for it.
The name. So it's Auto Tagger, and the help. And again, so me being a little bit naive in that world, made some errors. I was making some errors between the rule all and any, and the founder of the app kindly was emailing me, explaining to me the difference between the two, because I thought it was an argument in semantics, and it wasn't. It really does change things. So what I'm trying to allude to is, even if that sounds a little bit complicated, you usually find that the help desks for this tech are really helpful to make sure that you have the ability to implement what it is you're trying. So it actually becomes really simple, you know? And then after I identify what customers have bought what, or what I would potentially recommend, or would I potentially check back in to see if this is holding up, like dog toys. Okay, so in my world, again, sometimes the dog's main prerogative with that toy is to destroy it as humanly fast as possible, right? I'm going to rip this apart. And then you're sometimes annoyed that it doesn't last as long as you first anticipated. But there might be an opportunity for me to approach you a couple of months later saying, hey, how have they held up? Is it time for a refresh? And again, that's really easy to do through tagging your customer, putting it into a segment, setting up an automation. And again, if we go back down to the marketing that really works, is the one that's really poignant. So it's talking specifically at a need and specifically to a customer based on specifically what they bought. And you have all of that data, which is visible to you because it's on site, and you can communicate in a very hyper-personalized way through email to very little cost in comparison to try and reapproach that customer via paid. You know, you can have retargeting strategies, but you can't be that. You can't identify on Meta that this customer has bought a collar and not bought a lead. That's an impossibility. So there are things that email can do that your other marketing channels 100% cannot. So I don't think it's something that anybody should overlook. And I think that Seguno is a really solid entry point for somebody who is thinking about, oh, I should probably consider what opportunities I'm missing by not talking to my customers, or what opportunities I'm missing by not thinking about what they purchased, what they could potentially repurchase, or what they could potentially upsell to. I did a piece of work with a quite a well-known guy in the industry who's spent 3 months working with a very well-known clothing brand about their main sellers was t-shirts. So they did 3 months work on, okay, how do we get them to buy the knitwear? You know, what language do we need to say? Because the knitwear value has a much bigger cash margin than the t-shirt, but they've bought, they're interested in us, they're in our ecosystem. So you can spend, you know, months working out the best way to approach. But I would say doing something is better than nothing. It's never going to be perfect. You can always improve on it. So going back to it time and time again is not a negative, but just start. Just make sure you at least have the bare bones in place, and then start to get little bit granular with automations. And the lovely thing about automations, to round off my monologue, is once they're done, they are done. You could effectively just leave it and not to go back because it's automated. You know, the clue's in the name. It does it for you once you tell it what to do.
Yeah. And I think the important thing that you've touched on there so much is about making it specific to the customer. I think so often brands just send, as you said like before, it's an afterthought and they just send one email to everybody. Whereas actually you're speaking to individual customers now. And I love that analogy of like, would you want to buy the set? And actually that can become part of the brand story from the moment you add just the collar to cart. It can say, why don't you buy the lead as well? When you get into the cart, it could say, this is part of a set. And actually there's 5 leads you could attach to this. Do you want to put one of those in the cart as well and buy that? Or you could even incentivize them with a discount. The other thing brands are doing more and more that I see, which is really, really effective when you look at the numbers, is once you've purchased, saying here's 10% off if you add this in, but you've got a time limit because we need to dispatch the thing that you've ordered. So you've got an hour to add this thing in afterwards. And that is really effective. I did it with some shower gels I bought recently, and they chucked in some hand cream for next to nothing. And I was like, yeah, of course I'll pay an extra £3, but my average order value has just gone up by £3. So it's like, and I'm a happy customer. I've just got this great deal. I paid full price for the main stuff because it's worth it. And then I got this, which is good. So I think there's a lot you can do with all of that. And then email is almost, all of that is pretty much free. You're not paying Google, you're not paying Facebook or Meta or anything. And then you've also got, as you say, you've got the email then to start reaffirming that journey and saying, right, you didn't buy it today, you don't want it today, we accept that, but we are going to bring the conversation back up at some point. Or the dog toys one as well, you know, is it still going? I think it's quite a compelling one, especially anyone who's ever spent 10 minutes with a dog knows they love to rip stuff apart regardless of breed and size.
Absolutely.
Which is good.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Nice. Well, Alex, it's been great to have you on today. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us.
No problem at all. Nice talking to you.
Great stuff. And for everyone listening at home, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't already, check out our YouTube channel. We're now doing video, if you haven't heard. So you can come and see Alex and I having a chat, which is a bit late now because we've just had the chat. But for future episodes, check out the YouTube channel. Also check out our Instagram. We're posting more and more on there at the moment. We're putting reels out several times a week and also sharing some good content that we're finding on Instagram as well. So, yeah, make sure you tune in again next week. We're posting again next Friday. Thanks for tuning in.